Welcome back, everybody, to episode 3 with In the Kitchen. We're here today with Josh Cade, a fellow nerd and entrepreneur and apparently all-around wizard at this Kickstarter game that has been popping up and the kids keep on talking about. So today we are going to be discussing the business end of things with Josh, as well as his deep nerdery for D&D. Do correct me, Josh, if I'm not right with this, but your company is Dungeon Tape, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
For those of you that may not know, Dungeon Tape is a cool way to build battle maps, dungeons, and such. I slipped into some BattleSauce lingo there. Battle maps are what we call them. But for things like dungeon crawls and buildings and architecture, that's a really cool concept. We'll have links to that. And dungeon starters. That was the Kickstarter that funded 850% more than expected. That's outstanding. I want to start with just the basic things because, as an old school nerd myself, what brought you into the roleplay world? Where did that initial leap into this nerddom start?
It started about 7 years ago. I was 30, working one of the most boring office jobs I've ever had in my life. I was working for an architecture firm that just didn't have any work for me to do, so I was sitting at my desk 8-9 hours a day, bored out of my mind, and so I started obviously just deep diving into podcasts, and I had never played D&D before at this point, but D&D podcasts were the one type of podcast I could listen to for 5 hours straight, mostly due to the improvisational nature of the storytelling. Whereas other podcasts had a certain cadence to them, intro, outro, and they were almost too predictable.
Yeah.
And so I got into Nerd Poker, Adventure Zone, a couple others. And after about 6 months, I knew the rules and how to play, and I started begging my friends to also learn the rules, and I ended up homebrewing my first campaign just for my one buddy of mine, and it was just a one-person campaign that lasted for a little while.
Does it not feel like a mental illness when that starts to really kick in and like take over? Because obsession, that's I mean, for the old school nerds, man, once it gets in there, it's like a hamster. It just never stops.
Yeah.
How did that go, that initial game? Was it everything you had hoped, or did he mess it up immediately?
On the contrary, I messed it up pretty immediately. It was actually a really fun campaign until I introduced time travel to it, and I thought it would go fine, and then all of a sudden there were about 12 timelines to keep up with, and we kind of just said, let's just call it done, and we'll start over somewhere else.
Michael, earlier, you were going to ask Michael? Because that leads into something I think you might be about to ask.
No, go ahead. Let's see where you were going with it.
So I cut my teeth on old school D&D. I've got a shelf of books right here. They're all there. And one thing that I was always perplexed by were certain stipulations with things like the mechanics, and wizards aren't allowed to pick up anything bigger than a stick or a knife, and things of that sort. So when you're developing your own campaigns, your own games, things in like the whole time travel bit, when I look at something like, Dungeon Tape, that is the physical manifestation of a guy problem solving a bunch of hurdles really quick. So when you homebrew like that, was it an easy transition from what you would call standardized rules to homebrew?
I thought so, and it might have been because of some of the podcasts I listened to early on. I know they leaned heavily in the homebrew. But to me, from kind of listening to podcasts, and that's how I got into D&D, the rules of Dungeons & Dragons felt more like a physics engine for a video game. It was more the bounds of like how to figure out what you can and cannot do, but it wasn't necessarily rails. And so, much like physics, there's some things you can do to bend the rules, some you can never break most of them, but that's kind of how I thought of the D&D rules. Still do.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I noticed like everything that all the products that you're putting out with the dungeon tape and the dungeon starters and this forthcoming dungeon decks is really about sort of simplifying things for the player. Do you find that that's like is that like the hardest entry point for you in like Dungeons and Dragons, for example, or other role-playing games? Are those the kinds of problems you were trying to solve there?
I've definitely worked on solving some of those issues. For me, it's mostly because that's what I see lacking in the community most.
Yeah.
And what is most important to me about D&D is the collaborative storytelling. And there's a lot of clunkiness in D&D, and a lot of times that'll inhibit the storytelling that we kind of build off of each other. And we end up trying to act out what we think the DM wants, but in reality, we all need to or not need to, but it's fun if we all kind of add our own elements to the story. And so all of my products try to make that, try to make it more fluid for the improvisational nature of D&D.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it absolutely does. Yeah. Role playing in general, it's all improv. But it's interesting because and this is a thing, and so I've been running games for years now, years and and I started out with the whole D&D thing, and then I moved into Shadowrun a little bit. I discovered a game called Rifts. Symbieta did that, and then I discovered the D10 universe, the Mark Reinhagen universe of D10, and haven't looked back since until BattleSauce came along. And so, as a narrative element, and I think most of these games are, in fact, more than anything else, narrative elements, unless you're playing Warhammer and it's a tabletop numbers game, also fun. But otherwise, I think there's an element of narration with all of it. You made the way you worded that, I was very interested in. So, like, as far as the game that you are playing, is it it goes either way. Are you in the camp that the story is the providence of the storyteller and that the characters are within that framework? Or I tend to be more of the idea that it's, once I write it, it's just up in the air anyway. And so I stop caring and just let the game do what it does, you know? Do you have a division there when you write a game? Is there a methodology that you lean into more?
I think of it more as I'm writing problems for my friends to solve, and how are they going to solve it? Honestly, I can never guess. Like, they do everything ass backwards and kind of upside down, and yet it makes perfect sense that, like, while we're playing, and I love it. And so, no, I usually try and create an interesting world that evokes either emotions or feelings, or they can visualize themselves in it quickly, and then throw a big problem at them, and just, a lot of times I don't even have solutions for these problems. I just throw an encounter and say...
It's crazy, right? It's great.
Yeah, like, for instance, kind of a case in point, whenever I start a new campaign as Dungeon Master, I always I have one encounter I typically throw at people early on, and it's just, I call it like an encounter with two carts. It either takes place on a narrow alleyway or a mountain pass, and there's just two carts trying to get by each other. You know, one's selling chickens, one's selling like smaller carts, who knows? And like, the players aren't even really involved with either of the cart owners, but they need to get through, and their way is blocked, and these two cart owners are just shouting at each other. And I've found that that's a really good way of getting them to think outside the box, because I have no idea how these carts are going to get separated. I've had campaigns where the whole group picks up one cart and just tosses it over the other one. I've had campaigns where the group just murders both cart owners, and then they take the carts to town and try to sell the stolen goods immediately. And so it's just... that's kind of indicative of how I develop campaigns as a whole. It's just I put something in there that is an encounter that's kind of goofy, easy to digest, and I just see what they do.
That's outstanding, actually. That's outstanding.
Yeah, it also gets them in character, which is nice, because we're all nerdy, and I mean, I know voice actors out there and other people slip into character easily, but for my friends and I, it's always nice to have a low stakes encounter at the beginning to kind of like test out your game voice and stuff.
Well, there's a vulnerability to role playing, and I think the people that don't role play don't quite get that. But there is, and it can get cringy. I was at a game years ago when I was younger, and this guy joined the game, and he was a dwarf, and every time his character spoke, he would stand up at the table and take on a Scottish accent and painfully go through his dialogue. And I mean, he loved it. It was great, but it's a little bit awkward. So there is a vulnerability to this, and I think, I think people are starting to really kind of wake up to the idea that it's a legitimate venue for entertainment, especially with the licensing situations that have been going on and that are still probably going on behind shut doors. I was really curious, and I guarantee that Michael is, jumping tracks just a bit. I was looking over your website, and the way that you handle the Kickstarter stuff is just, it seems very natural the way you wrote it, and it seems very engaging, and it seems very easy to understand. I work with another role-playing company, and we're in the same boat where we're trying to get the Kickstarter thing going, and we're interacting with that whole front. And to see, and you did that yourself, right? That was you. The other company I'm with, we have a team of like 1,000. It feels like 1,000. There's like 20 people, and we still haven't quite got the refinement that you seem to have really just locked into. Was that a process? And again, not to understate it, 850% higher than anticipated is just kind of ridiculous, man.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah, so not only did you see a need for something, other people did too, and really latched on to that. I think that's really cool, and we're very curious about how all that played out.
Well, I just knocked it out in about 30 minutes. First try, didn't do any editing.
Sweet, yeah. It's real.
No, that was.
I was like, really?
No, not at all. It was. I mean, I've done a lot of technical writing through. I'm trained as an architect and done a lot of technical writing on describing how to, in the most simplest terms, do the proper roof flashing and draw details and stuff like that. And I've also worked really hard at writing narratives and short stories, and so all of that kind of comes into play when writing a Kickstarter, right? You need to express, like within the first sentence, you need an elevator pitch. Express exactly what you're doing and who your audience is, and then from there, it's just kind of telling the story of whatever your product is and the problems that it solves. And so I would like to say that I did it in 30 minutes, but it was, I wrote 10,000 words and just kept whittling out all of the fluff and sitting on it for a couple days, coming back to it, and it was just a whole lot of refinement. I'm super happy to hear you say that you enjoyed it, because by the end of it, I had read over it so many times, I had no idea if it was good or not.
To be very clear, and the way that we write for our own game here, BattleSauce, is least amount of effort that is needed from the reader to understand the content, right?
Absolutely.
And I am in the camp that I will almost instantly go into a standby mode when I start reading anything that seems rule-oriented or has to tell me something I have to actually pause and think about. And the way you had yours organized, I was able to absorb it immediately. And that says a lot, knowing how I am with information like that. Very, very well, executed.
That might have come from ever since I was a kid, I can remember when my family or friends would try to explain board games, they would just say, all right, here's the first step, here's the next step, here's the next step. And it would infuriate me because I needed to know what the goal was. It's like, I have no idea why we're doing these steps. I don't care if I draw cards and then lay them down. Why?
Yeah.
And so I overreacted as a child to that, but it stuck with me, and so that was kind of where this came from. Yeah.
You're also an engineer, so that applies, I guess, throughout the spectrum of your existence, is the understanding of logic, right, and the way things should work together. That's super cool. I've got 10 more things to ask, Michael. Do you want to jump in before I go on, just to be sure I'm not leaving you out?
Actually, one of the things I wanted to ask you about was your illustration art background. I think you have a real easy fluid, fun style. And I'm just wondering, is that something that you've picked up recently since as an architect, or did you study, draw, or do anything of that nature prior to all of this Dungeons and Dragons stuff?
I've always just kind of doodled, and I think a way of keeping myself engaged while listening to lectures and stuff like that. Especially as a young kid, trying to make stick figures look like they were emoting different actions and stuff like that was always fun. You flip books and whatnot. Specifically, the art on the website was because Dungeon Tape just looks so boring on its own. And I always remember my last website before this last update. I did all that I could with it, and I just kept looking. I'm like, man, I just need color and a little bit of movement, and it's just black and white tape, and it's black and white tape for a reason, and I love it. But
yeah,
and so I said, all right, I blocked out a weekend and said, I'm not doing anything substantial. All I'm doing is sketching. And then I kind of came up with this background image. And, yeah.
That actually leads me to a few questions about the Dungeon Tape, because I know, first of all, you've got multiple packs. They're not just stone walls. You've got like stickers and stuff that you're throwing in there. First of all, can you tell us a little bit of like what comes into that pack? Which I love the design work. You could clearly tell your website, everything is all created by a designer. It's fantastic. And what is the future for Dungeon Tape? I think it was on your Instagram, you had mentioned that you've got new packs, new illustrations, and ideas coming up for it. And then one last question to throw in there, all that, if you're keeping up with all this, is can you tell us also a little bit about the tape itself? Is it like washi tape, or is it different than that? Or because I know you're an architect and I know you deal with that kind of peeling and moving things around, and if that's a whole different product or what all that, I'm super curious.
Yeah. So I'll answer these in what order I kind of think makes the most sense. I will say currently I am about to redesign Dungeon Tape, but the new designs are going to work on pretty much all of the same principles as the original Dungeon Tape. The original Dungeon Tape, it is just printed on washi tape, so it's all bamboo and recyclable. It's made to put down, peel up. I've left it on battle maps for like 2 months on accident, and it didn't leave any gunk or residue and stuff like that. So that's kind of the main purpose, is to, if your players say, well, let's go in that building, and you're like, well, shit, I didn't design that building, you can quickly just like knock it out.
Yeah.
And give me a second.
Yeah, exactly. And I know we can do that with markers, but markers are actually really kind of hard to see across a table.
Yeah.
Especially, and I call what I call table haze, which is either just commotion or feeling fidgety or being distracted with lots of people, or it's like beer.
And that is the coolest term I've ever heard, man.
Yeah, table haze.
I'm writing it down.
Yeah, and so I tried to make the tapes all super visible. That's why they're dark black and not just outlines. The reason they're black and white, and will probably stay black and white unless I do limited runs of color, is because one thing that kind of bothers me with there's a lot of beautiful pre-generated maps and map tiles out there.
Yeah.
But they're fully rendered, and that locks you into a scene, and it kind of takes away from the theater of the mind. And so if you're trying to narrate a snowy mountain pass and you're laying down like green grass tiles, it ruins that, or doesn't ruin, but puts a hurdle between the player and the story.
Yeah.
So all of my stuff is meant to be a little vague. Stone walls, just so the players get an idea of like, okay, I can't punch through this. And then to that point with the stickers, I also wanted to make it easy for the DM to be able to lay down the walls and then have doorways. And when I was experimenting with with just the tape, it was another hurdle to stop and like cut little 5-foot segments out. And so I said, well, screw it. We can, like, 1-inch stickers are cheap and easy, and so you just do the walls real quick, slap the stickers on top, and peel it all up at the end, and you're home from home. So yeah, that's pretty much an outline of Dungeon Tape. the tapes and tint. So I have a couple different types of walls, stairs, wood planks, a rope bridge that also doubles as like train tracks, and
Love it.
with the new set, it's going to be more cross-hatching and kind of look like hand-drawn maps.
That's super cool.
Do you?
Super cool.
Would you consider? I mean, have you considered doing like a sci-fi themed one with metallic walls and consoles and things like that?
Yeah. So one idea I had for a while ago. Basically, I have a list of about 5 or 6 Kickstarter ideas that keep constantly rotating and whenever I'm gonna get to them. And one of them, it wasn't sci-fi, but above sci-fi was the different planes. Fire element, the elemental planes.
Nice.
And I wanted to do a sci-fi later. Mostly, I wanted to do the planes first because then I could come up with a campaign starter that lets people take their group through the planes. It was going to be you're following around a business wizard who hired you to take a cart of his goods to his storefront in each of the planes. And so you would get all of the dungeon tape that was themed for whatever elemental plane you were in, and you had like the skeleton of the story to work around. And all of that came about because I realized I'd been playing for D&D for like 5 years and had never been to a different elemental plane. And it's because you never have a reason to, and they're hard to wrap your head around. And so I thought, all right, well, screw it. Let's throw a business wizard at it.
That's very Terry Pratchett of you, man. That's awesome.
Thank you.
If you know the author, that's very much right up his alley. That's very cool. Now, so as
just rambled. I don't know if I answered your question or not.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. I was really curious though, and I don't want to stick the cart before the horse, but I know you've got a couple other things that are in the works that I wanted to ask about, but down the road kind of stuff, so a lot of what it seems like you focus on with these kinds of projects are ways to expedite the game and sort of take away, like you said, hurdles. We do that as well. That's the basis. Michael hates rules of any sort, and I try to keep him somewhat grounded in reality. So we come to this really neat compromise with that.
I'm writing that down in my notes. Michael hates rules. Got it.
Mike hates rules, man. Hates them. But I'm really curious, when you have these kinds of concepts and these ideas, and you seem to want to refine the process, does that take you out of the creative mode as far as your games go? Because there is a difference in, at least in my experience, where you've got the narrative and you've got what makes the narrative operate. But sometimes that goes weird, and if you focus a lot over here, it can sort of pull you out of that. Does that engine run well for you, or is that a me thing as far as the business end of it goes for mechanics as opposed to narrative? Is it still fun, after 28 hours of sketching out dungeon tape? Are you still cool and want to go play on Monday night?
I keep it pretty separated, but at the same time, Dungeon Tape came about over a year, so I'm only spending a few hours on the weekends on this, so it's not, the business side of things doesn't really take too much time for me. And
that's excellent.
Yeah, I've worked really hard to achieve a good work-life balance, and I haven't got there yet, but I'm gonna keep working towards that. So yeah, usually my routine is Saturday morning, get up early, go to a coffee shop, and I'll take both my laptop and my sketchbook and just kind of feel out if I want to doodle or if I want to price different tape manufacturers in different countries. I also run on so many Excel spreadsheets to keep myself organized. Also, shout out to Airtable. Data management, phenomenal. I use the crap out of Airtable.
I will be looking that up
awesome.
tonight.
I don't know what it is.
I don't either.
Luddite. I don't know anything. This is all new to me. So, do you have a down the road kind of a concept for what you want to do, like a 5-year plan or a long-term plan? Is with a business model with that? we're really curious about the development of those things. And what's that look like for you?
Well, ultimately, the goal for me is to entrepreneur my way out of going to an office for 40 hours a week. I think that's kind of everybody's goal who's a maker and running any sort of business in D&D. It'd be nice to not just work in AutoCAD constantly. But as far as specifically for Dungeon Tape, I am still just enjoying running Kickstarters for the majority of income. And so just to put it in business perspective, I'm not relying on trickle sales from month to month to make too much of a profit. It's going to be a different Kickstarter probably every 2 months once I really get going. And those will be... So essentially the goal is to have like 3 products that all have biannual releases. So that's one release every 2 months, but it's a product that releases, on opposite sides of the year from each other. So I released one Dungeon Tape in January. I released a new Dungeon Tape, or maybe the Sci-Fi Tape, in like June or July, something like that. But in between then, there's different releases of a couple other products.
That's very cool.
That is super cool. Do you want to do our Kickstarter for us? Because that would be great.
I'm totally down to consult if you get it up. Just send me a
Here's what you say, Josh.
Down, yeah.
I'm sending it right now.
Yeah, send it. But yeah, Kickstarters are a lot of fun. I like them because I already do a lot of refining on my product ideas and game ideas just so that I can digest it. I think it's because I have like 12 ideas rattling around at all times. I have to really figure out what they are and get them down to an elevator pitch for myself.
Yeah.
So that I can compartmentalize them, and usually I'll just write it down and like put it in a Google Drive folder or something and say, all right, cool, I don't have to think about that one for a while because it's been I've got the synopsis written and it's done. And a lot of that comes with the precursory like business research of, okay, cool, what's the price point that people would pay for this? What's the price point of like very low level cursory research of, can these products be made, and if they can, at what price? My general rule of thumb, not to let me know if I'm too in the weeds, but my general rule of thumb is the actual product cost should be 1/4 of the final price. And that allows for 1/4 profit, 1/4 materials, 1/4 labor, and 1/4 like shipping and packaging.
Which, dude,
that's nice.
I was so curious. Your packaging that you did for Dungeon Tape, I'm like, man, that looks so good. Is that just where did you find that and how did that work? And the second part of this, I know you have a product with you. I'm dying to see what in the world it is you've got on hand today.
Yeah, I'm just fidgeting right now.
Yeah.
So the box itself for Dungeon Tape, forget the company. I think it's called. I'll look it up. They're produced out of New Jersey. It's a really good box company.
Okay.
And they do just all over box printing, and so I got to design the whole thing myself. It took a few tries to get boxes that the tape would fit in, and even now, whenever people buy the Dungeon Tape and the bonus like added pack, I have to like really stuff it in. But you work within the constraints of the manufacturing, and so I could have made custom sized boxes that fit tape perfectly, but it wouldn't have fit the price range that I wanted people to pay for it. Yeah, I can give you guys a quick overview of like the next 3 products, and then we can just kind of chit chat about them if you want. How about that? All right.
Absolutely.
That would be excellent. Just right quick checking in. We'd like to keep the half-hour initial time standard, but it can go another half. Mike, do you know where we're at? Just to keep that in mind.
Yeah, we've probably got about 20 more minutes or so for the hour mark, but we have surpassed the half hour.
That's perfect, Josh. Yeah, let us have it, man.
All right. Yeah, no real-time constraints on my end. I'll probably get hungry at some point. So
it happens.
Yeah. So we already kind of talked about some later re-releases of Dungeon Tape, which I think will be fun. I guess I'll work kind of how my theory on these Kickstarters is working. I have one product that I've only showed with a few people, but it's one of my all-time favorites. It's called Minion Molds. And so essentially, whenever you want to fight 30 plus goblins, you don't want to buy 30 plus goblin minis. They're expensive, you have to store them, they're just bullshit little minis, just on a goblin. You could use dice or whatever, but they don't look the part. So instead, you buy one plastic mold of a minion. These will be in for goblins, skeletons, ghosts, cultists, guards, all the basics, right? Throw some Play-Doh in there, pop it out.
Oh, sweet.
And then you
Hell
have
yes, Play-Doh.
minions. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Play-Doh. And then you get the added tactile bonus of being able to squish the crap out of them on your battle map.
Yes!
Ultimately, I also want to make like small plastic weapons, so you could get a giant broadsword and cut them in half, or like maybe a little guillotine, so you could like behead the guard, all of the fun stuff. The giant lollipop as a nod to Adventure Zone, big hammers, all of that kind of as packs. I would love to, kind of the goal with all of these is to eventually also do limited runs with different artists, because I love doing all the back end work, but kind of to your point earlier, after you do a lot of that, you get tapped out creatively, and so to be able to use my work of like creating these like goofy little plastic molds and using that as a platform for a 3D artist to like, hey, I've got some rad skeletons, great, let's do a limited run, put them out there, like we'll make 50 of them and just sell them. And so minion molds is my big one. That's my fun kind of baby. I learned how to model in Blender for this. My buddy 3D prints my prototypes and stuff.
I was just going to ask you where that prototype came from.
Yeah, that's one. Shout out to my buddy Steven at work.
Steven at work.
Yeah, we're always 3D printing every time I ask him to. He's printed so many like skeletons and goblins for me.
No last name for Steven at work.
No, not without his permission. I'll post it in the comments later if he wants. But yeah, it's cool. Like this one's a little skeleton, so you just kind of load it up with some Play-Doh. It's got some alignment spheres in there. Squish it down. I haven't perfected it quite yet. I think it's mostly due to my novice nature as a I used to do a lot of 3D modeling in middle school for Counter-Strike, but I haven't touched it since.
Okay, now wait a minute. How old are you?
I'm 37.
So like, I learned to type on an actual typewriter. So. I was like, wait, you got 3D modeling in your high school?
No, I learned all that at home. In high school, we were still running like. I grew up in Oklahoma. We still had like Oregon Trail in the year 2000.
Oh, yeah.
Right on.
Yeah, there was 2 computers in Oklahoma, and we had to share them between all the schools. But yeah, so I made this little. I don't know how well you guys can see it. So this is the backside of a skeleton.
Okay.
And I'm just gonna peel them out, and so yeah, the fidelity's really low on the camera, but then you have a little Play-Doh minion.
Dude, that's amazing.
Dude.
I was going to ask you if you would do it right here for us, and I was like, maybe he didn't want to show it just yet. But yeah, totally turned out.
And I was like, I'm almost irritated by how cool that is, man.
Yeah.
Like, that's so badass.
That's a lot of fun.
Little goblins, you can just squish them around.
Yeah, and then you kill him, then you're like, all right, how do you kill him? I smash his head in, and then just
he's done for.
You don't have anything to store afterwards. You've gone through half a legion of skeletons, and all you have to store is 2 little plastic things. So that's.
And then you can color code them and everything. That's pretty awesome. You can get different colored Play-Doh, and yeah, they could be different. That's amazing.
And there's a lot of really cool Play-Doh color options out there that are cheap and easy. I've also toyed with the idea of basically selling colored like chalk packs, so you can make Play-Doh at home with baking soda or water. I forget what it is, but it's super easy. And then I would just have these color packs, so you could kind of mix and match your own mix up some homemade Play-Doh, and go to town. But I eventually decided I didn't want to get into chemical manufacturing and distribution, so I'm just sticking with the plastic molds for now. That's a later thing. I don't know. Maybe wash it smarter.
It's amazing.
Who knows?
So do you have a release date for that you're thinking about?
No. So this kind of transitions from Play-Doh back to boring business theory. So my first thought was I was trying to run the Minion Molds Kickstarter right around the holidays. But the holidays aren't really that great for Kickstarters because everyone wants real products. Kickstarter picks back up in like January, February, and then dies off around September, October. And so I thought about doing it then, put it on the shelf, and then I started thinking, well, Kickstarter is social media, and I hadn't really touched it since the original Dungeon Tape Kickstarter, and I honestly hadn't touched the Dungeon Tape Instagram in forever, except toying with it now and then. Kind of a hiatus. And so I thought, okay, well, social medias reward you for activity, so instead of just jumping into Minion Molds, which I think would be a big Kickstarter, I should do 2 or 3 smaller ones first. And like, one, get my feet wet again, remember how to write copy and edit, get a set list of, all right, here's the 5 things I need for a Kickstarter. And so the Campaign Starter Kickstarter was the first one that from my little idea list, because it didn't need a product. It was low stakes, very low money, and I used that for me personally as a case study, saying, cool, here's the 5 steps of generating a Kickstarter. So now I have my own checklists and forms to fill out for each of my successive ideas, and then I already have my to-do list, essentially. And so, yeah, campaign starters, 850% success. That is a little artificially high because I set the goal low on purpose. I kind of assumed 300 or 400. I didn't expect 1,800 by any means. A lot of that, I think.
Don't undersell it, man.
I mean, it was just goofy. Yeah. It was just goofy PDF stories from a guy that no one had read his homebrew campaigns for. So I didn't really expect many people to back it, but I think it is a testament to how Kickstarter works, which is a little annoying, but you want to be fully funded within 24, maybe 48 hours, and then people really start backing it. And to that reason, or to that sentiment, I think I owe most of that campaign to my mom, who donated $100 within 5 minutes of me starting it. And so she pushed it into the success realm and probably ticked all the boxes for Kickstarter to say, okay, we'll promote this one. And so
shout out to Mom.
Yeah, so I'm very proud of it, but it is my mom, a couple of my friends, Sammy and Tito, they all just helped out. But yeah, that was fun.
I mean, well, you say that, but you did, all of the products that you're creating really do, tap a need on what people are doing, that people see in role-playing games, and in particular Dungeons & Dragons, though I think most of the stuff you're creating, is applicable to any sort of tabletop role-playing game.
It's just TTRPG is chunky.
Yeah. I think you're solving this problem of hey, we need visuals, and you don't want to have to spend $300-$400 to get all of these minis, to have these beautiful maps made for you, or to spend hours creating a character. And I think it's really cool that you see that almost immediately, and you're like, let's draw some fun goblins or whatever, and people are like, hell yeah, this is the thing we want, and everybody hops on, and then you're like, well, the maps, these are cool, but all you need is some cool walls and stuff, and they're like, yeah, we want that too. So yeah, I'm super excited for the future of Dungeon Tape and all the stuff you've got going out, because you just keep finding these little niches that people. It resonates with other folks that are like, yeah, we want this kind of stuff to make our games go quick and move, fluidly, and not have to sit there and stop and take breaks and look at, all right, let me find a map, or let me draw one out, real quick, and oh no, I messed that up. I need to put other things on. I think it's super cool, and I think you're doing a really good job with that. So
I appreciate
outstanding,
it.
yeah.
And then, I got two more quick ones. One is the next one, which is Dungeon Art Decks, which I think you guys mentioned earlier.
That's your next coming Kickstarter, right?
Yeah, that's hopefully coming up in 3 weeks. I've got most of the copy written and some of the graphics done.
Yeah, I'm super curious about that one too.
Yeah, so that is going to be themed decks of 20 cards. They're printed larger than player cards, tarot card size, which I think is 2 3/4 by 4 3/4. Mm-hmm. And essentially the theory is they're similar to Dungeon Tape and Minion Molds. It's 20 different. So say you get the Goblin pack, because we'll just keep using goblins as examples.
Sure.
Packs will include quest givers, storefronts, pub patrons, whatever. But you get the Goblin pack. You have 20 cards. Each one has a different goblin on it. That's printed lightly enough for you to draw details over. So essentially, this is like, hey, you see 3 goblins, and people are like, I picked the short one, I want talk to him. And you're like, cool. I don't, like, I didn't, like, these goblins were just in the back thematically. Like, okay, let me get out these cards. You sift through, pull one out. They're like, hey, is this the goblin with one eye from before? And you're just like, yes. And then you take a Sharpie and you draw a eye patch over it. Because it's made to be drawn on, everything's printed lightly enough for you to do your own details that are campaign specific over top, and it's printed on nice thick playing cards, so that it's dense, sturdy enough to hold up for like a whole campaign. You just throw it in your backpack and you're fine. And so I want to do that for both NPCs but also settings. Like storefronts are kind of one that I'm really excited about. So if you have a magic shop or something, or a bar, you could quickly just write the name over a blank sign plate over the top, and you're good to go.
Love it.
On the back side of the cards will be just a blank area with lines for you to make notes on.
And it
That's
actually,
really cool.
Yeah, and it becomes sort of memorabilia for that game, which is also pretty sweet. That's a really clever idea.
Yeah, and this one I've already got a couple artists lined up to help me with. I have been using Midjourney AI to populate some goblin images, kind of like the placeholders. I've really enjoyed doing that. But I have my artist friends who I'm also going to include in the Kickstarter, and they're going to a lot of the stretch goals are going to be bonuses for them because they deserve it, because they're amazing.
Yeah, fantastic.
It's very cool. Yeah,
that's Dungeon Art Decks. The only other one I've kind of got in the works are basically D&D or TTRPG themed post-it notes.
Oh yeah, I remember you working on those.
Yeah, these were going to be my next one, and then they kind of got pushed down the line a little bit.
I love it because it's all Office meets D&D. You can tell you.
Right, yeah.
It is, man. It's badass meets nerdy.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah. I'm just sitting around the office, like, tapping my fingers, like, what can I do next? But yeah, I wanted something. For me, most of my tools are DM focused, which I've been wanting to get away from, but it's hard to. But players don't need much, right? But also as a player, like, I want to keep buying. Like, I want my game to be easier, and there's honestly only so many sets of dice I could buy.
Right. Yes.
Controversial opinion, I'm sure.
No, I love it. We love it here at BattleSauce. Keep going.
Have you heard BattleSauce, man? I don't know. Have you heard? Yeah.
Say that again.
No, BattleSauce. We're in the same boat.
Oh, yeah, perfect.
The innovation of things,
Yeah.
using different kind of props, different elements to make the game work.
It's
taking it out of the normal mold. Yeah.
Right. And one thing as a player that kept bothering me was my player sheets would get so filled up with basically junk, like items I wrote down that I thought would be important and weren't.
Mm-hmm.
And I started using a separate scratch pad as like a buffer between game and player sheet, and then I kept losing them, and so I thought, okay, well, shit, I just need post-it notes, and so I can stick them on the player sheet or like whatever map we were looking at, and then just throw them away if they're not important, and then actually jot them down if they are. And so these are just, I have an example, like super simple. You just write down a name, draw a picture, a couple lines. There's a 1D. It's like basically damage or healing. It's a blank D blank plus blank.
Uh-huh.
So you can just fill that in real quick.
That's excellent.
And
excellent.
they're just gonna be. These will probably end up being just like $3 or $4 add-ons for Dungeon Tape or anything else you buy, but they'll just come in your little post-it note.
You might want to trademark that, man, because I can see if this gets out to the general public and it gets back to some major industry, like that's cool.
It is. Cool. I was so jealous when you posted that on Instagram. I was like, damn, why didn't I think that's fantastic? And I love all the simple artwork you were doing. I was like, this is great. I should have thought of that.
Oh my god, dude!
Easy to be done. They might just need an add-on.
You could have a little area in in another iteration of these where there's a little square that's open at the very bottom of the page for the flip books. You could have a dedicated spot for the flip book, so you can have you can draw your character dancing, right? That's you have a really neat vision of how to manipulate the environment of just the tools, just using the tools to make the game better. That's awesome.
I appreciate it. There's an old saying that I don't know if it's a real saying or if it was just something my old boss used to say, but he would say, if you ever want to find a better way of doing something, give that job to the laziest person you know.
Wow.
Yeah.
Find a more efficient way of doing it. And I kind of feel like that's me being a lazy DM coming up with these solutions. Because the first iteration...
And yet you're doing Kickstarters and work, and you're building the shit.
Yeah.
The iteration may be from an ease of access, but the effort it takes to get there, man, you're not slouching by any means.
No, that's all from trying to get out of an office job, for sure.
Amen.
Yeah.
I'm expecting to see some sort of use for rubber bands coming up soon, or staplers or something.
You want to play Dungeons and Dragons, but you have too many staplers? Try out Dungeon Stapler.
Yeah, Dungeon Stapler. Each stapler will does 2d6 damage.
That's awesome.
Exactly, yeah. Tell your friends. Yeah, maybe I'll just start coming out with, I don't know, fake dumb idea products and see if copywriting skills will make him sell on Kickstarter or not.
Well, you certainly seem to have a knack for hitting things that people really want, which is very cool. And I'm jealous every time I see them. I'm like, oh, Dungeon Tape, that's a cool idea. And it's like, oh, the Dungeon Starters, that's pretty cool too. Oh, he really turned down how to make these. And I was like, okay. And now you're making minis. Making minis look easy. And I'm like, stop.
Making minis look easy, dude. Yeah. That's awesome.
Well, it's been fun. I also had a Netflix. Sorry. Are we trying to wrap up? I don't want to keep rambling.
Well, I was about to say we've got another couple of minutes.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask if you wanted to mention anything. Now, here's the deal, though, Josh. We love the idea of you ever coming back at any point in time you wanted to. This is a hoot. So this is not a one and done. So
perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, the idea for these in the kitchens is to build a community for the homebrew network. There's a lot of us out here developing games, writing games, doing art for games, content, music, whatever that is. And I think the market, Michael and I both, we've adjusted how we do things to accommodate what seems to be resurgence in the public's eye for this kind of entertainment. So, having you come back would be fantastic, especially when you're a multimillionaire and can fund all our projects. Because, damn.
Sooner than that, because if we rely on that as the tipping point of when I come back, we'll just be waiting a while.
Well, let's have you back again, maybe more soon than that.
Yeah. And on the note of community, and last couple things to say, there's a couple of people I have to give a shout out to. My friend James from Tactical Tokens, he has been an immense help since day one. He somehow found my original Dungeon Tape Kickstarter and approached me through that, and we've been very good friends since. He's been a huge help. Tactical Tokens are also a really cool product if you guys don't know them. They're basically they replace minis, but they're small. They're circular, basically little pieces of plastic that you can draw on like a whiteboard, and so you can really quickly just write a G on it for a goblin. They also print them with images on one side, and you can flip them over.
Oh yeah, that's clever.
Images. they're a really cool product idea, and they've done a really good job on product. Another is my buddy Brian from the Bearded Nerd. Since early on, he and I have gotten along, and he's had me on his podcast. We've played D&D. No, we just talked a lot of D&D together. It feels like we played D&D. He and I have talked endlessly about world building and stuff like that, and it's been a blast. But yeah, those two people, also many other supporters. Let's see, Vivi. What's Vivi's DM handle? Shit. Bad Instagram friend. Yeah, there's too many to count or remember at this point.
Well, hey,
there's a lot always.
You can hit us up, and when we post this, we'll be glad to put it all in the links and stuff too, to give a shout out and link to their socials as well too. Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah. Actually, get that to us so we can do that.
Yep.
And having you back, I've already got like 15 things I want to ask you for the next go around.
Okay.
So,
Perfect.
honest to goodness, man, you're apparently a wellspring of innovation. So that'll be a lot of fun.
Adam, one of the things I want to do is have him back and play a BattleSauce game, and then have him be like, "All right, here's what I'm going to create because these are the things you need for BattleSauce." If it's going to be like,
you know what, Josh, we will get with you later, man. We may have to do a little BattleSauce.
That was kind of a joke. That was kind of a joke, but I would love to have you come and play a BattleSauce night with us at one point if you're down.
Absolutely.
I've been admiring the artwork in the game itself since we've been Instagram.
Yeah, I've never talked to you in person, so it's a lot of fun to chat with you tonight.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for
Templar looks like he just man, very, very welcome. And actually, Templar's in our audience. He's one of the two in there right now. He said it would be a blast to play with you. Any last words, thoughts, wisdom? Any of that sort of thing?
It's about to explode.
Temporarily last words, not last words.
No, just Dungeon Tape or at Dungeon Tape on Instagram is my main social media and will continue to be. I'm transitioning that to just be the headquarters for all of my ideas and stuff. So follow along and reach out. I'm slowly trying to get it back going again. I don't know. We'll see what happens. It's been fun.
I did want to ask.
Excellent.
Wait, hang on. I had a question. Let's see. Shoot. Dungeon Tape. Right. So you're still producing Dungeon Tape? People can go and come and buy it and get the packs and all that stuff. Is that right?
Hopefully soon. So essentially the snag I ran into that kind of put me on a hiatus was I ran out of some of the stickers, which is an easy fix, order more, but I wanted to use that as a time to redesign things. And so I have them out of stock right now, but I think what I'll do is turn it back on just to kind of get through some old stock. But I need to look at that and see if I just need to order. I think I ran out of doors, so I think I might order some new door stickers and say, cool, it's the old design. I'm not 100% happy with it, but it works great, and it's going to last until the new Kickstarter. So soon, to answer your question in a long-winded format, soon you can buy Dungeon Tape on my website, dungeontape.com.
Sweet. I love it. Your website's fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah, it really is. And we'll have all the links up and you get them to us. We'll make sure that's out there. Make sure to get the links to the people that you would like us to support also. And this, guys and gals and everybody in the audience that will see this later and soon, we've been in the kitchen with Josh Cade and myself and Michael Startzman. Final thoughts is roll true, play hard, and invent and create. And remember, guys, it's all in the sauce. And we will see you around hopefully soon again. Josh, this has been fun.
Yeah, Josh, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Hey, be well and take it easy. Oh, hey.
He loves to do that.
Just goes, oh, hey, and cuts out.
Yeah, that's his favorite.
No, fair enough.